Hello and welcome to World News here on TVP World. It's 12 o'clock live in Warsaw. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy said he will wait for President Putin in Turkey for peace talks, but only with Putin. Now, this comes as U.S. envoys are being sent there to help mediate the talks should they happen. Meanwhile, European Union leaders have agreed on a new package of sanctions against Russia. Let's go now live to Kyiv, where our correspondent Oz Chatterjee joins us. Hello, Oz. Now, what can you tell us about all these ongoing developments? How are Ukrainians reacting to this? What do we know?
So we do have the announcement of that 17th EU sanctions package against Moscow. Now, it's believed that this package is not in response to Russia failing to agree to the 30-day unconditional ceasefire that European leaders have been pushing for. Now, all eyes are heading towards Istanbul tomorrow, where there's supposed to be peace talks between Russia and Ukraine at the invitation of Russia. And it's important to remember, Putin was the one that suggested direct negotiations between Russia and Ukraine to happen in Istanbul on Thursday. Since making that announcement, Putin has not said a single word about going to Istanbul. We do not believe at the moment that Putin has agreed to go to Istanbul. Instead, he's sending his dignitaries, such as Sergei Lavrov. Now, President Zelenskyy, who's on his way to Turkey, said that he would not be meeting with anyone less than Putin himself. So we could be looking at a situation where very little actually materializes on Thursday. The big question remaining, if, as it currently stands, Putin and Zelenskyy don't meet in Istanbul on Thursday, where does that leave the threat of further sanctions from the European Union? Where does that put Washington, who have tried very hard to try and find common ground between Washington and Moscow? The White House's strategy, if Putin doesn't come to talks on Thursday, is going to be in total disarray. They will not have had any success in bringing these two sides together, and it will be clear that Putin is the obstruction to any peace agreement. The question is, what will Washington do in response to that, if anything? The Europeans will certainly be pushing for further sanctions, but what they called massive sanctions against the Kremlin should it fail to agree to a 30-day unconditional ceasefire with Ukraine.
And like you mentioned, Oz, we'll have to wait until tomorrow to see how those cards will play out as well, and if the meeting will take place. Thank you so much, Oz Chatterjee, coming to us live from Kyiv. Members of NATO's military committee have met in Brussels to discuss the biggest challenges facing the alliance. This includes scaling up defense as well as making the ambitions of political leaders a reality. We're now joined by our EU correspondent, Angela Skujins, in Brussels. Angela, hello. What can we expect from today?
Yes, so good morning. We heard the chair of the NATO Military Committee, Admiral Giuseppe Dragone, addressed reporters roughly at 8 a.m. this morning and stepped out the agenda for today's talks, which are attended by representatives from that 32 alliance membership. So first up on the agenda is figuring out ways of strengthening the alliance. Number two is shoring up support for Ukraine as it weathers another year of Russian aggression. And thirdly is the preparatory work before that NATO summer summit at The Hague. Let's take a listen to what that NATO military top boss had to say from Brussels.
Our focus must remain on what truly matters: strengthening our deterrence and defense capabilities, enhancing our engagement with partners, and ensuring the security of our citizens and allies against recognized and potential threats. On top of this, our support to Ukraine shall and will remain ironclad, so that when the time will come, Kyiv will be able to sit at the negotiating table from a position of strength. All this requires investing time and resources, because peace and stability cannot be taken for granted and come with a price. But the cost of security is nothing compared to the cost of fighting a war and recovering from it. If we do not continue to invest in this vaccine of deterrence, we expose ourselves to an increased risk of instability and make ourselves unnecessarily vulnerable to threat. Investing more, and not just spending more, is paramount to maintaining our peace now and in the future.
Yes, so this is formally what has been spoken on the record regarding these meetings, but many here in the Belgian capital understand that these military chiefs getting together today is all about figuring out ways of transforming those political ambitions from those prime ministers and presidents of the alliance into an actionable reality. Media reports suggests that at that NATO summer summit, the NATO defence spending target is expected to be scaled up from 2% GDP to at least 5%. This comprises 3.5% specifically on military capabilities, with 1.5% also on top of that being for infrastructure. Now, we understand that those 32 representatives are meeting today to hammer out whether this is achievable, because we know that there are a few straggling alliance members that have not met that basic 2% funding benchmark, but we know those as well. Those foreign ministers are meeting in Turkey over the next few days to discuss this and more, but a press conference is scheduled for 5:45 Tuesday, where we're hoping for some more concrete outcomes of today's talks. But that's all from Brussels. I'll send it to you in Warsaw.
Thank you so much, Angela Skujins. European NATO leaders have to come to terms with the possibility that the United States will not fully commit to its obligations under the alliance. Former U.S. Army counterintelligence officer David DeBato told TVP World that other NATO member countries do not realize the risk of the United States taking a back seat.
Look, one of the biggest problems, if not the biggest problem, aside from the lack of political will of NATO leaders to be honest and have an honest discussion with their public, is for the NATO leaders to accept the fact that America is no longer going to lead NATO. Whether that means that they're not going to support NATO if an Article 5 emergency is declared, for example, that remains to be seen, but I wouldn't count on it. NATO has to proceed right now as if America is not going to be there to support them. I hate to say that. It hurts me very, very deeply to have to say that. But I don't believe that right now, again, and I'll use the Estonia Narva example, I don't believe that the 82nd Airborne is going to be dropping into Estonia if Russia went across the Narva River into Estonia. That's a horrible thing to say. Would America eventually contribute some forces if that in fact occurred? Probably. But look, NATO has to accept the fact that they're pretty much on their own, and they need to get their act together now.
The U.S. Department of Commerce said it will lift its restrictions on the sale of AI chips to Poland, as well as many other countries. Now, the so-called AI diffusion rule was introduced by the Biden administration in mid-January, reportedly in an attempt to curb the spill of the technology to China and Russia. Because of the rule, a vast majority of prospective buyers, including Poland, were faced with a limit of 50,000 AI processors, with merely 18 states exempted as, quote, key allies and partners. Now, the new Trump administration has decided to rescind the regulations, explaining that, quote, new requirements would have stifled American innovation and saddled companies with burdensome new regulatory requirements. Though now import of chips to Poland will be easier, the U.S. has pledged additional steps to strengthen export controls on the technology worldwide. An unexpected high-level spat between Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk and Romanian presidential contender George Simeon has broken out on X after the Romanian politician endorsed Polish presidential hopeful Karol Nawrocki, supported by the largest opposition group in Poland, the Law and Justice Party. Now, Simeon and Nawrocki met in Poland 5 days before the crucial votes in both countries.
Przyszły prezydent Rumunii, przyszły prezydent Polski.
This is the plan for two like-minded European right-wing presidential candidates who met in the southern Polish city of Zabrze on Tuesday. Simeon, who won the first round of the election in Romania, is bracing himself for the runoff on Sunday. The Romanian ballot coincides with the first round of the presidential election in Poland, where Nawrocki is one of the main contenders. Simeon used the joint rally to fuel anti-EU sentiment.
The unelected European bureaucrats tried to steal democracy in Romania. But Romanian people stood up for freedom like you stood up against communism.
Simeon later joined the crowd chanting Poland and Romania common cause. For the endorsement of Nawrocki, he took flag on X from Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk.
Russia rejoices. Nawrocki and his pro-Russian Romanian counterpart George Simeon appear side by side on the same stage 5 days before the presidential elections in Poland and Romania. Everything is clear.
And Simeon answered back promptly, claiming it is Tusk that is Putin's friend.
In this photo is Putin's man in Poland. The whole of Europe knows it. Nobody believes your lies and hypocrisy anymore, Donald.
Simeon has for long been the presidential race favorite in Romania after he garnered almost twice as many votes as his run-off opponent, centrist mayor of Bucharest, Nicu Șordan. Now they are going neck and neck in the race a few days shy of the election. According to experts, this might compound Simeon's chance for a victory.
Last night, he agreed and he promised to participate in a political debate with Mr. Nicu Șordan on TV. He promised. He never showed up. And then we found out he was in Poland.
As for the Polish presidential race, Nawrocki is consistently polling second, trailing behind the liberal Warsaw Mayor Rafał Trzaskowski of the largest group in the ruling coalition. But according to some opinion polls, Nawrocki is battling far-right Sławomir Mencen to even enter the runoff. Both Polish and Romanian elections will take place on Sunday, May the 18th.
And that's all for this edition of World News here on TVP World. I'm Diana Skye. Thanks for watching and stay with us for more news, features, and commentary.